Hello, and welcome to Before the Arch, the podcast that centers around the lives and narratives of students at Northwestern. This week's episode engages with students who hold identities within the LGBTQIA+ community. Before we jump into things, it is important that we take the time to thank the countless queer and trans BIPOC activists who have sacrificed to allow queer people to survive, thrive, and flourish in places like Northwestern. We also wanted to take a moment to recognize that the narratives that we are sharing do not represent all experiences at Northwestern, and that there are some voices, mainly those of trans, asexual, and non-binary students, that are valid, however not present in this episode. With all that being said, let's jump right in. My name's Carter. I am a rising senior studying theater and computer science and design in the Siegel Design Institute, and I am on the board of Wildcat Welcome. I've served as a PA for 2 years, and now this is my chance to lead PAs through the experience of transitioning new students. And so when I came to campus, I wasn't really expecting LGBTQ life to be like my big call to action, I suppose, my big identity on campus, but it's definitely impacted me in so many little ways throughout my experience in other student groups. So I was never the person who was active in the Rainbow Alliance, which is the LGBTQIA student group on campus, but I was able to find LGBTQ spaces in other student groups. So I was really active at Northwestern Hillel, and they actually had a queer Havdalah, which is one of the ceremonies that tailors around Shabbat. I have been in and around the theater community, which is a really positive environment for queer voices and queer identities. And I was actually a part of the formation of a chapter called Out in STEM, or OSTEM, at Northwestern, which is for queer identifying students who are working in STEM fields. So that's science, tech, engineering, mathematics, and just amplifying the fact that people exist in these industries who are queer. It's not just a straight person's world. I also, through Wildcat Welcome, one of the affinity groups for PAs was the LGBTQ PA affinity group. And so I've constantly been surrounding myself with queer people in an effort to make the world a better place for queer people in and around college and beyond.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I am a third-year student. I'm a theater major and sociology and music minors. This is my second year as a PA. And yeah, my experience being LGBT on campus is interesting because I had just come out to a good majority of my friends as gay my senior year of high school. So when I entered college, it was a part of my identity that I wasn't afraid to hide anymore, but I wasn't super used to it just being an aspect of me. And I was actually a bit nervous going into college with just letting that be a part of my identity. And so I feel at first it was something that I would hardly ever mention that I was gay unless it was a very pointed conversation about it, just because of me being uncomfortable within my sexuality. And like Carter said, I wasn't really a huge part of any LGBT groups on campus, like Rainbow Alliance or anything like that. I just didn't see myself getting involved in those is a huge aspect of who I was. But fortunately, as a theater major, as Carter said too, the environment that I was surrounded by, because most of my friends are theater majors, is just an incredibly positive and super open group. And it was really cool to go to college and meet so many queer people, especially in the theater community. And through that, and through people sharing their experiences with me and just being so open about their identities, I was actually able to become a lot more comfortable with myself and just talk about myself and my identity in a more casual manner, and realize that it was something that I didn't need to necessarily keep inside of me and make this uncomfortable private thing, just because I'm fortunate enough to go to a university where all the people I'm surrounded by, at least, are really open and great. And so that's just sort of where I'm at and where I've been these past couple of years with going to Northwestern and my identity.
Hi, my name's Alex Chun. I'm a rising second year in Medill. I'm studying journalism and double majoring in sociology. I'm a first year PA and am very excited. So I come from a relatively conservative suburb in Minnesota, and so there weren't a ton of queer people. I've always been super open with my identity and just as comfortable with myself as you can be in white suburbia. But a big part that informed my queer experience is me being Asian American. And so when I showed up on campus, I wasn't quite sure what to expect in terms of how diverse the campus would be, how many queer kids would be there. And so I showed up on campus, and my freshman PA, or my PA my freshman year, was also queer POC. And that was actually so great for me because I was able to form a great connection right off the bat. And she's still a mentor that I super look up to today. In regards to being on campus and finding queer spaces, so I'm a journalism major. And so within journalism, I guess we're all pretty open-minded. And most of my circles and the friends that I hang out with tend to be queer and also tend to be POC, which was really formative for me just because I've often struggled with balancing my queer identity and my Asian American identity, and finding other QPOC on campus really allowed me to explore myself and just be pretty authentic, because coming from a conservative white town, I was really used to code switching, whether it be with my racial identity or my queer identity. And just with other QPOC friends, I was able to be more authentic, which is amazing.
For people who don't know, what is code switching?
Sure. So code switching is essentially when you kind of downplay, I guess the best way to put it is like stereotypes, or trying to assimilate more into like a mainstream, like accepted version of a body. So for example, when I'm in white spaces, I often kind of hide my Asian American identity, don't really talk about my culture. Or when it comes to predominantly straight spaces where I might not necessarily feel safe being a queer body, changing the way that I speak or just the way that I interact with other people in a way that is more straight passing rather than like conflated with stereotypes that queer bodies hold.
Yeah, so I wanted to probably like get started with the idea of like coming from a background that does not necessarily acknowledge queer identities and moving into a space that does. Would you say that Northwestern is an affirmational space on the whole?
Yeah, I would say overall, definitely from the moment I came on campus, I felt secure in my identity. And I mean, from Wildcat Welcome with you, Carter, being my PA and being so open about your identity and different experiences and what campus has to offer, I was just like mind blown that like all of these opportunities presented themselves, and that Northwestern was a space where we could all be our authentic selves and feel secure in that.
I agree. I wasn't super involved with like Rainbow Alliance or queer groups on campus, but in terms of the circles that I was in, I kind of just fell into queer groups, like queer friend groups. And I remember like in my dorm, I lived in the greenhouse, and there was maybe 15, 20 kids in each floor. And literally half of the kids on my floor was gay, which ended up being super great because I was just like, wow, I feel so much more accepted, or can be so much more myself coming from a space where there weren't a lot of openly gay people. Yeah, I would say that I never felt like I had to hide my sexual orientation at Northwestern.
I would 100% echo those sentiments. And it's a really interesting thing to come into a space where you don't have to hide, because I come from like a white suburb in Orlando, Florida, the South. Like my mom is from Tennessee, my dad is from Kentucky, but I come from like a very liberal queer family. 2 out of 3 of my siblings hold some form of queer identity. My twin sister transitioned when we started freshman year of high school. And so I always remembered being in a queer bubble surrounded by what was not a queer accepting space. So the idea to constantly be straight passing in like my public life and not straight passing in absolutely. And I constantly think about it too. When I'm constantly trying to edit my mannerisms to appear like the correct way as far as masculinity goes. What were your experiences then coming to campus and then going back home?
I was going to say, I feel like my home experience was like the exact opposite of what you just described. Like I am from Southern California, so it's a very liberal area, like pretty chill. Like when I came out at school, like it was like not a huge deal whatsoever, but my family is very like Catholic and conservative. And so I was more afraid of coming out in my home life space and being myself at home. Like coming out to my parents was one of the most nerve-wracking things ever. And I am very fortunate that even though we're conservative and Catholic, they're very, very accepting. And, but like before that, I had genuinely no idea how they'd react. And also like all my extended family still doesn't know, because like my mom's family's from Mississippi. It's a whole Southern mess. But yeah, it's interesting coming from that opposition, because I guess what's been ingrained in me is it being more okay to be myself in public spaces because I come from a more liberal area where like it's not like frowned upon, or like being gay isn't some like shocking thing. Like I knew quite a few people in my high school, especially in the theater department. So I don't know, like having that flipped background from you kind of makes it easier in public spaces, but I still definitely have some sort of thing ingrained in me. Like being Northwestern, it's hard to think of specifics, but just like not like acting too gay. If I do non-theater things, honestly, that's when I feel it the most, just because that's the community I'm most comfortable in, which is interesting.
So kind of similar to you guys, my parents are also from the South, it's Texas specifically, and my mom was a pastor's kid. So I had come out at a pretty young age, kind of accidentally, different story. And so my parents had many years to kind of move towards a more accepting place. So coming home was totally fine because I left feeling like home was a safe place. And so I came back to another place that was safe. I would definitely say, though, that my family has been partly radicalized by my identity. I think it kind of put us in a position where it was either like a learn about like, or just like learn and accept me, and then like let's move towards being more of like a radical, like open family. And so that's kind of been a process that my family's been going through these past few years. And then definitely going to Northwestern, I had become comfortable to being completely myself and like finding my own style in the way that I dress, which is something that you don't always have the freedom to do in a high school that is like in a conservative town. And so I didn't want to change the lifestyle that I had like adapted to at Northwestern. So coming home, I was very like adamant about being completely authentic. And to me, that meant redoing my room, redoing my wardrobe, just being completely open with just like the way that I dress. And I mean, I've been fortunate enough where my family has been able to be a safe place. And I just keep trying to push us to be more radical when I can.
Would you say that having individual spaces on campus separate from your family life have aided in your identity, your growth in this metric of your identity?
Yeah, honestly, having my own space, I feel like even though I feel very secure at home with my family, fortunately, I think having my own space allowed me to grow a lot more than I could here. I mean, no matter if you have like the greatest family ever, I mean, you're just alone a lot more with a roommate or not, and thinking more about your identity and who you want to be. And especially like going to this brand new place where, I mean, in my case, I literally knew no one when I went to college. And so I was presented with this unique opportunity to discover my identity more and become more myself for these people that had no preconceived notions of me. So yeah, going to college, it was a huge, huge, huge bump in me learning more about identity and presenting that.
Same here. I've always kind of been into just style or fashion stuff. And I would say that's most evident in terms of like me finding my own space at Northwestern is just like coming into my own style that's a little more unique and I felt more comfortable expressing. Also on my floor, I had another queer person of color who just lived a few doors down, and he was one of my best friends on campus. And it was super great to have him as a resource and just be a resource for him. And we could talk about what it meant to be queer in a white space or just different stuff about our identity, and having our own space to grow independent from the communities where we grew up and just find our own and do it with someone who held a similar identity was super, super great.
I'm really glad you had that friendship.
Me too.
So I kind of want to pivot a little bit, because the first thing that new students are going to be experiencing when they get to campus, whatever getting to campus means, is Wildcat Welcome. Now, thinking back to your experience and your Wildcat Welcome, how did that affect your thoughts about your own identity?
I would just say, like, I mean, again, coming from a conservative town in Minnesota, which is predominantly white, the diversity T&D for me was interesting because, I don't know, my high school never really talked about diversity and such. And so I guess seeing T&Ds where the first few things that we talked about when we went on campus was diversity and mental health, I thought it was really important that the university valued those 3 points. And I loved that our PAs encouraged us to engage in those conversations and think critically about diversity at Northwestern and think about how the university is promoting diversity or in some cases failing to. But coming from a place that was predominantly white, I hadn't ever really experienced something like that. I personally thought that campus was really diverse when I showed up. And to me, it was really affirming in being able to be myself and not having to code switch.
Yeah, I would echo that 100%. The T&Ds are so great, and something that I think honestly is the best part of Wildcat Welcome is being able to have those conversations with your PA groups. And specifically, like with this question, the diversity T&D, it really made me reflect on myself, because deals with literally every single aspect of one's identity, and just like reflecting on that. And I remember when I was in my discussion with my PA group, and my PA was talking about his identity and like being super open about being gay and whatnot. And like in my head, I was like, why can't I just like say it out loud? Like, this isn't that big of a thing. And I feel like I ended up not, just because like it was still such like a nervous pit of my stomach feeling. But having that space to talk so openly about identity was really affirming that Northwestern as a whole was an open and accepting space. And that meant so much to me. So from that first week on campus, I was so fortunate and felt so great to be given that knowledge that Northwestern was going to be an accepting space for me during my time there.
Well, and you were an absolute joy to have in my PA group.
Thank you so much.
Don't tell any of my other PA students that. The beauty of the PA group structure, right? The fact that you come to campus with a mentor, a peer mentor who has been through it at least for a year, and then can walk you through how to navigate what pitfalls exist when you transition to university, especially when you transition to a school that is pretty big, a medium-sized institution. There are 2,000 people who matriculate into the class every year approximately. And so being able to find those small groups, especially small groups to talk about things that you can't talk about at the dinner table in Allison Dining Hall on South Campus. I would never walk into a space of 15 people sitting at a lunch table and being like, hey guys, let's talk about identity. Let's talk how what it means to be queer. But Wildcat Welcome gave us space to do that. And that's what I've been super thankful for. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask a stereotypical question. So starting with Alex, what would you tell yourself if you were talking to first year you right before you came to Northwestern?
I would say that college truly is a new leaf. Even though I did come from a relatively conservative, very white town, I actually had a great time in high school. And part of that transition into college was me thinking a lot about high school and thinking that some of the great memories that I made in high school, I also wanted in college. And I thought that college would kind of be an extension of my high school experience almost. And so I went into college kind of having this idea of who I wanted to be, how I wanted my college journey to look. And it ended up not being with that. And I'm so thankful that it wasn't, because I didn't realize that I truly just needed to start a new leaf and just like explore myself and find who I am and like in my own space and with other queer people of color to help us affirm one another and share experiences that I didn't realize other people had as well. So I would just say that like college is truly just a time where you can just turn a new leaf and explore yourself and just be authentic.
Alex, thank you for your answer.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I don't need to be like too back and forth about my hometown. Like I hate it, but I also liked it. So.
No, I get it. It's hard when you're in a love-hate relationship with a place. Like right now I'm in a hate relationship with Orlando, Florida, because Florida should just be like crossed off the map.
Florida's insane. Every headline is like Florida man and then something crazy.
Florida man starts queer podcast. That's me.
There we are.
Look at you. I think the biggest thing that I would tell myself, and it's honestly like what last year when I was a PA echoed to my PA group the most, is that adjusting to college takes time, and there's no one way or one path that is supposed to happen. Each student's journey to adjusting to college is completely different. And for me, I think that relates a lot to like my identity specifically. Like for me, fall quarter was not the easiest when I came on campus. And a lot of it was because I was in my head about different aspects of myself and in my head about trying to compare high school friends to college ones. And like just my experiences there versus here and whatnot. But for me, like specifically winter quarter, my freshman year is when things really, really turned around. And from then on, it's really only gone up. And I absolutely love this school with all my heart and my friends and what I do. And I'm just so, so grateful for this path. And so I just think it's really important to emphasize that adjusting takes time. And I mean, you could be one of those people that during Wildcat Welcome, you find your group of best friends and you're like all your activities and you're sailing through to the end, and more power to you, But I just, I think it's important to emphasize that everything's different for each person, but it's all going to be okay in the end.
I think both of those are just great pieces of advice. And this is probably going to be one that, Sarah, you have heard because I said it in a billion places. But I would love to remind people that like paths are not linear. I'd love to tell myself at the very beginning of my college experience, there is no direct course of action in anything. There are loops and there are doubling backs and there are moments where you reassess what you're doing and go in a different direction. And there are moments where there's this uncharted territory that you're just, I have to go through this to see what happens. But not only do you have the ability to constantly walk down new paths and make new choices and make new decisions, open yourself to that. Like open yourself to doing things that you don't expect. Open yourself to saying like, I'm going to try something. And then if it doesn't work, I don't have to do it anymore. And then you'll be better off for it. Ultimately, 4 years is not a lot of time, but it's also a ton of time. You don't have to be everything all at once. And you also don't have to be everything. You can just be one thing. And that's probably a good way to go as well. I wish someone had told me that when I got to college. Oh, someone did. My PA would slap me upside the head and be like, I told you, because she did. And I did not listen. And she was right. I think what's important to remember as well is that like identity is not one thing all at once, is not one like, oh, you're this and then you're this forever. Identity is constantly changing. It's not just an all or nothing thing, and you're not one thing forever. It changes, it grows, it morphs, whether it's code switching into downplaying one part of your identity or learning where one identity that you hold intersects with other identities that you hold. It's all growth. It's all learning.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And like, I would say that one of the biggest struggles for me is that I often tried to box myself into one identity, whether it be being just a gay person or an Asian American person. And I often didn't think that they had room to coexist. And so college was really a time where I was, and actually quarantine, I don't know, where I was really able to just step back and just like think about how those two exist, because I often felt that if I wanted to be in Asian American spaces, I couldn't show that I was gay, or that if I wanted to be in queer spaces, I couldn't show that I was Asian American to the extent that I could code switch. And like college just was a really great time for me to think about my identity and just come to terms with the fact that they can coexist and that I don't need to be boxed in and that I can have my own journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting for me to like just know that it's like within the LGBT community, there's so many different identities one can hold, and you're allowed to change what that is. You're allowed to not necessarily have a label within that community, but know that there's something there. Like, I just think it's so important to emphasize that every single identity is so, so, so valid, however you feel. And it's also okay just not to know. I mean, I know that for myself. I saw many friends at Northwestern go through growth and changes in their identity, specifically within the LGBTQ plus community. And I just, I think it's important to emphasize that that is a constantly like growing and shifting thing. And that's completely valid.
A message out to all of my non-queer people. I guess they exist too. I'm kidding. I probably can't put that in a podcast. Anyway, to anyone who doesn't hold a queer identity of some way, shape, or form, or isn't sure that they do, I think it's important to remember that growing in what you think about things and changing opinions that you've held previously is a part of life. I think the current events in our world have really emphasized the idea that learning is a constant thing and requires effort, and change requires effort, and acknowledging that you're wrong. And it's okay to say, I held these misconceptions that I had before I came to college. And now that I started my transition at Northwestern, now that I learned about identities that people hold in a new way, now that I've met someone with an identity that I don't hold, I think differently, and that's okay. It has happened in one way, shape, or form to everyone at Northwestern. And I just want to affirm that growing is good. I guess, What kind of message is that? Yeah, growing is good.
No, I like that. That was like a subtweet for the homophobes who are going to...
Perfect. Yeah. If you're still listening to this and you are a homophobe,
please stop.
Yeah, we cordially invite you to stop.
I don't think they made it this far, if I'm being honest.
Oh my God. We start the podcast with, if you're a homophobe, please take the time to leave now. Or maybe we do one of those like viewer discretion is advised messages.
I think you should. I think that's a really solid entrance.
Yeah. This podcast is rated Q for queer. Gross. 100%. Did you guys have a good Pride month?
Oh. It's solid, more so amplified this year about lifting up Black voices. But, and it was weird for me not to actually like go to Pride in LA because I've been the past couple of years and it's like my favorite thing. And it was sad that was not the case. But, still doing stuff from home. What can you do?
Yeah.
Same here. I mean, I've actually never been to a Pride march or parade, which is something I really want to do. And I was kind of hoping I could do it this year, but I mean...
There's always next year.
Yeah, I mean, there were some more important marches in June, so I did some of those.
Yeah, and protecting your health and public health is always a good call,
Yeah.
Yes. That aspect of the world, too.
I did end up baking a cake is what we called it because it was a 6-layer rainbow cake.
Oh my God. I think I saw that on your story. It looks so good.
Yeah. I'm going to pull up a picture for you, Alex, because I think you'll really like it.
How was it? What kind of flavor? What kind of icing?
Okay. It wasn't the best tasting cake. It was just white cake with cream cheese, with like just regular old frosting.
That's all right.
But it was
wasn't
also
about the taste.
No, it's cute though, right?
Yeah, it's cute. Oh, it's cute. And also the taste, it tasted like a good white cake.
Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah.
That's so good.
And then
good.
the cross section is really where it's at.
Okay. I'm so here for that. How long did it take?
Literally like 2 hours, 2.5. We had to bake it in stages, but because it was so like we used like so little cake mix because they had to be thin so that we could fit it in like a reasonable amount of cake. It like cooked like that. It like baked in 10 minutes each layer.
Wow.
I just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to both of you for participating in this passion project of mine and sharing your identities. I know it's crazy to be vulnerable in what is a very vulnerable time, and it's even crazier to be vulnerable with an indeterminate number of people listening to you talk about yourself. So it does really mean just the world to me that you're willing to share your experience with new students.
Yeah, of course. This was so fun, and I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, same. Like, thanks for having us. And I don't know, it's just, I hope that kids who listen know that there are resources out there who are more than happy to have a conversation with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to get connected with any of us while we're on campus, well, for the time being, we'll all still be there. So if you're listening to this in 2028, please don't contact me.
Probably won't be around.
Probably won't be around. Yeah. Will the Earth be around in 2028? Tune in next time to find out. Thanks.
Asking the real questions.
Asking the real questions. If you would like to be connected with institutional resources that Northwestern has to offer, the Gender and Sexuality Resource Center, or GSRC, is the place to go. We also highly recommend connecting with the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. The Rainbow Alliance, a registered student organization at Northwestern, also provides a safe space for students of all genders and sexualities by supporting an active and social community. You can find links directly to those resources and everything else we mentioned in the show notes below. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and we'll see you next time.